Welcome to Aspen Leading Edge. I'm Patty Roberts from St. Mary's University School of Law in San Antonio, Texas, in the U.S. And the reason that I'm telling you what country I'm also in is because I have two guests today from Mexico. They are attorneys and professors at UNAM's law school, Alejandro Zeind and his brother Antonio Zeind. Also joining us is one of my colleagues, Professor Erica Schommer, here at St. Mary's. So welcome to all of you.
So much.
Really happy to have you as guests because we're talking about a new book which focuses on something that's so prevalent in everyone's mind in both of our countries and frankly across the world, and that's migration. But before we start talking about the book, I wonder if you all might explain why both of you as lawyers and professors at UNAM's law school thought that a book would be appropriate, and have you written books before?
Thank you, Patty, for the question. I think the key word is vulnerability. Migration means that there's a person in our country that needs to move to the other place, but in conditions that make her vulnerable. And with government turning into authoritarian governments, the vulnerability that these kind of people suffer increases. So writing a book like this with Erica and with my brother Antonio Zane, it's a need. We felt it like a need because with all the context, the current one, between our countries, with the new government in the US, with the government in Mexico, where the humanization of the humans in terms of migration are in low rate, we thought that writing this book was an actual need for us as a scholar, as professionals, and as a human.
Yes, I think also the wave around the world about the criminalization of the immigrants, it's a very hard problem, and we have to talk about it, and we have to go and to try to make proposals to make it better because both the nations, we are partners, we are also brothers and sisters, I think, and we need to resolve this problem. And of course, we are lawyers, we are professors, and I think Erica, Alejandro, and me, we think about the better way to make it. And a collective book with so many pens, so many things, it's a good way to do it and to make something for our world.
Well, thank you. I know that you all are not new to writing books. You indicated before the podcast that you do a book almost annually, but this one's the first one on immigration. And so the title of the book, just coming out, Migration, a Binational Perspective, Mexico and the United States, will be making its debut, and we will all be part of presenting it at the book fair in November. So I wonder if you can share a little bit about the book fair, and then I'll ask Professor Schomer more about this partnership.
Well, we are talking about the most important book fair, not only in Latin America, also including Portugal and Spain. So when we are talking about Feria Internacional del Libro de Guadalajara, we are talking about something magnificent, about all the people that like to read it, that like to be involved in letters and literature. It's a must to go to the book fair and at least once in their life. So we have the opportunity of presenting this book here at the beginning of the book, which is a great honor for us. Well, when we are talking about the Feria Internacional del Libro de Guadalajara, we're talking about the widest and maybe the most important book fair not only in Latin America, but also in Spain and Portugal. After the Frankfurt Book Fair is the biggest one in the world. So it's a great honor for us to present this book in third fair because the importance of the book, together with the importance of the book fair, could show also the importance of the topic of our book, that is migration. In my view, that is the most exciting part of presenting this new book.
Well, and you indicate that everybody should try to go to this book fair at least once in their life, and I feel so honored and privileged that we'll get to do that in November. And Professor Schomer and I will be part of this amazing project that you all put together. So, Professor Schomer, can you please share? You are a clinical professor here with St. Mary's, and you run our Immigration Human Rights Clinic so beautifully. You were part of an immigration immersion that you and then Professor Jen Stevenson and I went on, and it kind of prompted some of these discussions. But then, as a graduate of UNAM and as partners of UNAM at St. Mary's, this book developed. And can you just share about that, a little more about those partnerships and how this idea came to fruition?
Sure. So I was in Mexico City teaching a class at the UNAM, and Jorge Bandrazo had suggested that I have breakfast with Antonio and Alejandro. And thank goodness that breakfast happened, because that's really where the idea for the book happened. And I learned about their efforts of books that they have assisted in coordinating with students and professors in Mexico. And I really liked that model of having one or two students working with a lawyer or law professor and shaping a piece, having some guidance, but really allowing the perspective for students' thoughts on what is happening on diverse legal issues. They shared with me a book that they had worked on artificial intelligence, and said, "What would you think about us collaborating on a book?" And I thought that it sounded great. I spoke with Professor Stevenson, and it just kind of happened to work out that we were doing an immersion course with students. And I floated the idea with the students about working on a book with partners in Mexico, and it all came together.
Well, it's an amazing opportunity for our students and for the UNAM students who participated. What an important breakfast. I also enjoyed a great breakfast with Alejandro and Antonio in Mexico City, and we talked about this book. So really wonderful collaboration. If we're looking at the topics that the book covers, I think truly incredible thing about it is it starts with the historical context of migration between our two countries, and it does look deeply at both countries and how they have reacted, whether it was post-war migration patterns or the Bracero program, looking at all the evolutions of migration, but then how there were policy shifts and geopolitical shifts and the economic crises impact on migration dynamics. And finally, of course, our recent two administrations that have very different, here in the U.S., very different approaches to migration. So in the context of writing this book, what sorts of themes did all of you see emerge from your students, and what sort of suggestions did they have for the leaders of our countries for improving a situation that certainly could use improvement?
What we learned about the writing the book and collaborating with my university students and professors is that specifically when we read the collaborations written by our students, we obtained from them a fresh vision about the issues that are present in the migration matter. So when we had the opportunity to get together all the collaboration to build the book, to build it as a whole, we could note that this book as a whole is a proposal for our governments, for our authority. And it's a great product for them to understand the scope of their current policy, the reach of their current action, policies and actions that are threatening the most fundamental human right. So this book could maybe a great product for them to become more conscious about the actions they are carrying out.
Yeah, and that fresh vision that Alejandro said, it was a very exciting experience for us, for all the people that participate in this book, Patricia. And of course, the freshness, this exciting thing, and the participations between professors and students, it was a very good exercise. And of course, they make us note the distance between the law and the reality, and they have so many proposals about to enforcement the rule of law and the humanization of the immigrants, and of course the dignity of the humanity, because we are in just one world, and of course they make us know this, and they have so many proposals to make it better and go there to the vision of one world and know one country, other region, or other continent.
And if I can just add to what Alejandro and Antonio have said, that I think an overwhelming sentiment of the book is to really humanize the problems that we're encountering, because it's so easy to talk about immigration in terms of numbers and statistics, but especially through the students' eyes, they're very focused on the impact on real people, people who are our neighbors, people who are our students, people who are our family members, and seeing the humanity and trying to have our policies reflect the reality that we're impacting human beings who have rights, who are trying to live dignified lives, and also trying to push back on the idea that a country by itself can and should dictate a solution. Migration is an international phenomena, and any country's belief that they can control what is happening by unilateral action is not going to work out well. And this book is an opportunity for us to see side by side at different points in time how U.S. policies are impacting what happens in Mexico, how what happened in Mexico on a national level impacted Mexicans migrating to the U.S. And so it really is such a wonderful opportunity for us to take a step back and think in broader terms about what would be a different approach to what the status quo has been for the past few decades.
It really broadens the context
Yep.
when you're looking at migration across both countries. And I think you're exactly right, Erica, that you can't just look at it from one country's perspective. When we went down for the immigration immersion in Mexico with some of our students and went to a detention center, you realize that it's not just about people getting to America. Those people have to come through Mexico. And what are the impacts there, not only on those people trying to make that journey, but the people who live in Mexico? Alejandro?
Yeah, if I can add something, is that something that I love about this book is the students. The students showed that they have much to say about. By writing their own chapter, their own collaboration, they spoke out about their needs as immigrants or as a second generation Mexican Americans, and even Americans by virtue that participated in the book, spoke loud about this. On Mexican side, also we had some students that took advantage of this opportunity to write about their feelings on migration because they have relatives immigrating to the United States or relatives that have migrated to the United States. Then there are a really profound, deep link between our country that our students saw in a way that is really, really interesting, significant, and very incredible. That's what I want to say about the participation of our students in the book. American ones and the Mexican ones.
Well, what an amazing learning opportunity for them to tackle these topics, to try to come up with solutions, and to do so in collaboration with their colleagues from the neighboring country. This shows them that you need more context in coming up with solutions than just our own country's policies or their country's policies. So very, very exciting educational opportunity for them. And I'm so grateful that you all led this initiative. Were there any surprises when you read the students' chapters? Was there anything that surprised you about their contributions?
Yeah, I think the hack level of our students in Mexico, and then when we see the collaborations of your students in St. Mary's, we have to be sure that we are making a very good job with them. And then we have to be sure that they are putting their talents, their discipline, their hard work to make it the best way. And of course, we have to think about what is the world that we have to let them, and how they can improve that world. And of course, the sentimental thing about we are just one world, and all the illusions around this subject, I think it very hopeless to us and to our institutions, the St. Mary's University and the UNAM.
Absolutely. And by the students having this experience, learning from all of you as professors about these issues, but then digging deep into them in order to contribute to this book, they are being trained and formed into those servant leaders, those policymakers that we will see tomorrow, the ones that we hope will solve this problem in a way that the current politicians of both of our countries have been unable to do. Professor Schommer, did you find more similarities or differences between the contributions of the students depending on which country they reside in?
I think that the similarities that I found from the students is the hope and the possibility for something different. And that particularly in this moment is very important because we are in difficult moments where in both countries the immigration systems are being tested, and it's a very difficult time for our clients, for non-citizens in the US. But the fact that students do see that there should and can be a better way in both countries does give me hope. And I think it's interesting that is universal between both places.
Do you have anything to add, Antonio or Alejandro?
I would like to add that when available, you need to get the book because it's a great effort above all from the students that participated in the book. So we need to value that effort because nowadays when things like the artificial intelligence is governing some academic work for the students, the effort of writing from the scratch a chapter of a book is something that we need to value as senior professors or senior lawyers. And my personal view is that I'm very proud of our students in our Mexican world. And we are sure that all the professors in St. Mary's University will be very proud of their experience in this editorial effort. And thank you very much, Patty, for inviting us to this podcast. And we are ready to see you there in Guadalajara and Erica.
Absolutely. So the book again is Migration, a Binational Perspective, Mexico and U.S. I've been very impressed with how quickly you got this to publication in time for the book fair, but also in time for these critical discussions our nations are having regarding migration. And the publisher is Tarrant Lo Blanche from Mexico. I did want to mention Alejandro and Antonio Zeind have a firm in Mexico, Zeind and Zeind, and they provide legal services in the areas of corporate law, company formations, administrative law, intellectual property, contracts, many other things, while also being senior professors at UNAM's law school. And I don't know how you find the time to then also do a book, but I'm so glad that you did. And Professor Schommer continues her work with our Immigration and Human Rights Clinic, teaching our students here in the U.S. how they can help those seeking to migrate, many of whom are migrating from Mexico. So before we conclude, I want to ask one more question about the book and then a final question that I ask all of my guests. And the final question about the book is I would love for each of you to share one thing that you learned from this experience of writing the book, whether it's topical related to migration or just the book process itself or something with your students. So perhaps, Antonio, would you start with one thing you learned from this process of writing Migration, a Binational Perspective for Mexico and the U.S.?
Thank you. Well, the very high honor to make it with very special people like Erica, like Alejandro, like Jennifer, and then with you, Patricia, and with the St. Mary's University, that is a very high level institution. And of course, the book process, it was very intensive. We make a very intensive job to have at the level of our institutions because the thing that we are from St. Maurice and UNAM, we have to make the best job that we can do. And this is my experience that I will remember all of my life.
Wonderful. Alejandro?
My learning about this process is that I can say that it's one word: potential of our students to be a key leader in law matters, in politics matters in the future. But also that I also loved is that these authors, these students, these professors have the social concept that now they are failing in all the world. But when we are in front of this kind of students with this kind of attitude, with this kind of responsibility, it's something that we as professors, as lawyers, we need to value about these students. And the thing that these students have the migration matters in this highest important list of things is something that called me because there are some people out there that is interested in make migration more human.
Thank you. Professor Schomer?
So I think my biggest lesson is a lesson that I hope translates to the work as well. And that's that we should not let borders keep us apart. When we first were talking about the book, I said, well, I don't have that many students who can write in Spanish because I was just thinking we're going to do this book with Mexico. This has to be something written in Spanish. And Antonio and Alejandro said, it doesn't have to be like that. Your students can write in English, our students can write in Spanish, and that did make it much more accessible. It made it much more inclusive. And that is a lesson to me, right? We can't let differences prevent collaboration. And I think just not allowing language differences to be a border or an obstacle is something that I think we need to use going forward with so many things and look for ways to be inclusive even when we may speak different languages and when we're coming from different legal systems. That doesn't mean that we can't collaborate.
I love that. That's a great way to end it. This has been such an extraordinary project and a capstone to the work that we have been doing at St. Mary's to make sure that when we're exploring these issues that have binational impact, that we're doing it with our partners in Mexico. So very pleased about that and grateful to Jorge Madrazo and Jen Stevenson, who were also instrumental in this work. So before I conclude from talking about the book, Migration, a Binational Perspective for Mexico and the U.S., I wanted to ask you all my final question. And we have the benefit this time, because we have professors and attorneys from both countries, to ask it with an international perspective. So I'd like to ask Alejandro and Antonio to each share what their predictions are for the future of legal education in Mexico. And then we'll end with Professor Schomer asking the same question regarding the U.S.
Well, now we are talking about predictions. I think this book will be very successful about the book and about the legal thing in our country in Mexico. The eruption of the technology and the AI specifically, it will be a very hard work to make from the lawyers, and the crisis of the rule of law all around the world, in Mexico, in other countries, it will be a challenge also. And I think the thing with our society in Mexico, it will be a very hard challenge also because I think, we are in a crisis of values. We are in a crisis of the talk with the truth all around the world, in Mexico also. And it will be a challenge for our profession and for Mexico entirely. Thank you, appreciate.
Thank you. Alejandro?
But Patricia, I think the main challenge for law to teach law in our law school is we need to form students with more rule of law awareness. I think the flexibilization of the rule of law in all over the world, in Mexico, in other countries, demands that we as professors, we need to put more effort on getting back to basics in teaching the law for our students. Going back to principles like rule of law, like the separation of power, like counter and tech theories, it's fundamental for our students to understand that there's something that get together all the ideas of the law construction in history. And those principles are the things that we need to teach to these students because the artificialization of intelligence and also the teaching of superficial ideas about law are affecting the understanding of the law as is in our students. So the rule of law awareness, the back to basics in principles of law are fundamental for us to teach. And I think we need to put more effort in teaching this kind of things to our students in the top future.
Well, you're certainly not alone in thinking that. In fact, there is a rule of law global academic partnership that's been developing among law schools in the US and across the world, and they're having their inaugural conference in Toronto in November. But I'm going to send you information about that because there are groups of faculty from law schools all over the world struggling with exactly what you're talking about. How will we continue to teach our students to enforce and uphold the rule of law? Professor Schommer, how will things change here in the coming decade, you think, in legal education in the U.S.?
So I'm going to answer very specific to my silo of legal education related to immigration clinical work and make a prediction that I think the future of legal education relating to immigration law is going to include collaborative work between clinics across borders, particularly because the U.S. is externalizing our immigration system and people who otherwise would be here are now in Mexico, being able to work collaboratively with legal clinics in Mexico and with other lawyers and nonprofit organizations in Mexico, I think is going to be key to serving our communities, both for people who are trying to come here, but also for, unfortunately, the many thousands of people who are being removed. So I do see a future that this book serves well is being an example of binational collaboration. And I think that that's where our immigration work is heading. And this book gives us a wonderful blueprint of what needs to change.
Well, that is absolutely the case. And I would take that bet on your prediction because I know that St. Mary's, under your leadership and with partners like Alejandro and Antonio Zeind and Jorge Madrazo and some of our schools in Mexico, we will have cross clinic, binational clinic opportunities and continued learning opportunities for our students on both sides of the border. And it's very exciting. So thank you all for being guests. Congratulations on publication of the book. And I can't wait to be with you to present it in Guadalajara. If you enjoyed this conversation and want to talk with additional or listen to additional thought leaders in legal education, you can find Aspen Leading Edge podcast episodes on your favorite podcast channels and on YouTube. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.